The champagne was flowing. The crystal chandeliers sparkled above 400 guests in their finest evening wear. Sarah looked radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown, every inch the perfect bride marrying into the Harrison family fortune. And there I sat at table 17, tucked away near the kitchen doors, watching my daughter's dream wedding unfold like a stranger at my own family's celebration. Let me tell you something about watching your child erase you from their life. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow fade, like a photograph left too long in the sun. First, the weekly phone calls become monthly. Then the monthly calls become texts. Then the texts stop altogether, replaced by silence so complete you start wondering if you ever had a daughter at all. But I knew this day would come. The moment Sarah started dating Marcus Harrison 3 years ago, I saw the writing on the wall. Marcus, with his trust fund and his yacht and his casual mentions of summering in the Hamptons. Marcus, whose father, James Harrison, owned half the commercial real estate in Boston. Marcus, who looked at me like I was something stuck to his Italian leather shoe. You want to know the real knife twist? I'm the one who raised her. I'm the one who sat through every parent-teacher conference, every dance recital, every science fair. I'm the one who took 3 jobs to send her to private school after her mother Helen died when Sarah was 8. 3 jobs. I taught biology at the community college during the day, tutored rich kids in the evenings, and worked weekend shifts at the university lab. My hands were raw from chemicals, my eyes burned from late-night grading, but Sarah was going to have opportunities I never had, and she did. Full scholarship to Princeton, medical school at Johns Hopkins, a residency in pediatric surgery that had hospital directors fighting over her. My little girl, the one who used to catch fireflies in mason jars and ask me to explain how their lights worked, was going to save children's lives. But somewhere along the way, she decided that the man who raised her was an embarrassment. The first time she brought Marcus home, I saw it in her eyes. The way she quickly steered him past the small living room with its second-hand furniture. The way she apologized for the neighborhood, as if the modest suburban street where she'd grown up was something shameful. The way she introduced me as Robert, not Dad, when Marcus's parents came to dinner. Robert teaches at the community college, she said, her voice carrying a note I'd never heard before. Shame. My daughter was ashamed of me. James and Catherine Harrison had smiled politely, the way wealthy people smile at the help. James had barely looked at me that night, too busy discussing his latest acquisition, a luxury hotel chain he'd just purchased. Catherine had spent the entire evening talking about their upcoming trip to their villa in Tuscany. But here's the thing about shame. It grows like cancer. By the time the engagement was announced, Sarah had created an entire new narrative about her childhood. Suddenly, she'd practically raised herself after her mother died. Suddenly, I'd been emotionally distant and unable to connect. Suddenly, the sacrifices I'd made were rewritten as neglect. The wedding invitation arrived 4 months ago. My name wasn't on the inner envelope. I found out from Sarah's Aunt Linda that I was invited only because Catherine Harrison insisted it would look bad if the bride's only living parent wasn't present. She's calling you by your first name now, Linda had told me over the phone, her voice heavy with disapproval. She told the Harrisons that you were just a presence in her life. Growing up. Robert, what happened between you two? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. My daughter discovered that having a working-class father didn't fit the narrative she wanted for her new life. And I let it happen because I loved her too much to fight back. Because I thought, maybe, if I just stayed quiet, stayed in the background, she'd remember eventually. She'd remember the man who held her hand during thunderstorms, who taught her to ride a bike, who sat by her hospital bed when she had pneumonia and didn't sleep for 3 days. But sitting at table 17, watching her glide across that marble floor like she'd been born to this world of old money and older privilege, I realized something. She wasn't going to remember. Not unless someone reminded her. The reception was everything you'd expect from a wedding that cost more than most people's houses. Ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra, waiters in white gloves serving appetizers that were more art than food. I recognized some faces from Sarah's childhood, neighbors who'd helped us out after Helen died, her best friend from middle school sitting uncomfortably at a table near mine. But most of the guests were Harrisons and their circle, investment bankers, old money families, people who measured their worth in generational wealth and country club memberships. I'd worn my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for Sarah's medical school graduation. It was clean and pressed, but I could feel how it hung on me differently than the custom-tailored suits around me. My shoes were polished but not new. My tie was silk but not designer. I was a biology professor at a community college in a room full of people who owned the buildings where people like me worked. The table assignments told their own story. Table 1, the Harrisons and their closest family. Table 2, Marcus's business associates. Tables 3 through 10, various categories of important people. And there, all the way at table 17, tucked near the service entrance, Robert Mitchell, father of the bride, and a collection of other people who didn't quite fit the Harrison vision. I was seated with Linda, Sarah's mother's sister, who kept squeezing my hand under the table. Next to her was one of Sarah's former professors from Princeton, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, who seemed as bewildered as I was by the seating arrangement. Across from me sat Tom and Jennifer Chen, who'd lived next door to us when Sarah was growing up and had babysat her countless times. The sympathy in their eyes was almost worse than the isolation. "This is wrong," Linda whispered as the waiters brought out the first course, some kind of foam that was supposed to be soup. "She's your daughter, Robert. You should be at the head table." I should have been walking her down the aisle, too. That honor went to James Harrison, who Sarah had asked to give her away. "He's been such a mentor to me," she'd explained in the clipped phone call where she'd informed me of her decision. "He's taught me so much about the world. I think it's appropriate." Appropriate. That was the word she'd used. Not, "I love you, Dad," or, "You're important to me." Appropriate. I watched James escort her down that aisle, his hand on her arm where mine should have been. I watched him smile at the cameras, playing the role of the generous father figure, welcoming this brilliant young doctor into his family. And I watched Sarah gaze up at him with something that looked uncomfortably like adoration. Do you know what it feels like to be replaced? Not just in your child's life, but in their history. To watch someone else step into the role you built, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. The ceremony was beautiful, traditional. The priest spoke about love and commitment and family. Marcus's vows were polished and perfect, probably written by a professional. Sarah's were heartfelt, speaking of finding her true family, finding where she belonged. She looked at Catherine and James when she said it. Not once did she look at table 17. The reception moved into full swing. Dinner was served, courses I couldn't pronounce, featuring ingredients I'd never heard of. The wine was older than some of the guests. The wedding cake was an architectural marvel that probably cost more than I made in a month. Between courses, there were toasts. Katherine Harrison went first, her voice trembling with practiced emotion as she spoke about how Sarah had become the daughter she'd always dreamed of. James followed, eloquent and commanding, talking about legacy and family, and how proud he was to welcome such an accomplished young woman into the Harrison line. Marcus's best man delivered a funny, slightly crude speech that got roaring laughs from the investment banker tables. And then it was time for the father of the bride. I saw the wedding planner approach Sarah, saw Sarah shake her head firmly, saw the planner's confused glance toward table 17. And then I saw Sarah stand up, take the microphone, and make an announcement that would change everything. Before we continue with the evening, Sarah's voice rang out over the sound system, clear and confident. I want to address something. Many of you have noticed that the traditional father-daughter dance isn't on tonight's program. The room went quiet. I felt 400 pairs of eyes trying not to look at me. The truth is, Sarah continued, her chin lifted, her posture perfect. I don't have a father, not in any meaningful sense. The man who shares my DNA is here tonight because propriety demanded it. But James Harrison has been more of a father to me in 3 years than Robert Mitchell was in 25. The words hit like physical blows. Linda gasped beside me. Dr. Ellis's hand flew to her mouth. I felt Tom Chen's hand grip my shoulder. So tonight, Sarah said, her voice not wavering, her eyes not meeting mine, I want to publicly thank James for showing me what real paternal love looks like, for mentoring me, for guiding me, for being the father figure I always needed. My father, in every way that matters, is standing beside me now. She turned to James, who looked simultaneously pleased and uncomfortable with this public declaration. She hugged him while 400 guests applauded, and I watched my daughter officially erase me from her life story. But then, Sarah did something even worse. She looked directly at table 17. Directly at me, and in front of everyone, with the microphone still live, she said, "Robert Mitchell, you are dead to me. You have been for years. I just wanted to make it official." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, people turning to stare at me with mixtures of pity and horror and morbid curiosity. Katherine Harrison looked mortified. Even James seemed shocked by Sarah's bluntness. Marcus stood frozen beside his new wife, clearly not expecting this level of public drama. This was it. This was my daughter's final statement. Not just exclusion, but annihilation. She didn't want me quietly fading into the background. She wanted me erased, deleted, unmade. Linda was crying. Tom was half standing, like he wanted to do something but didn't know what. The entire reception had gone silent, watching, waiting to see what the humiliated man at table 17 would do. And you know what? I smiled. I smiled because Sarah had just given me the perfect opening for something I'd been carrying for 40 years. A secret that Helen made me swear to take to my grave. A truth that would detonate this perfect evening, this perfect marriage, this perfect new family like a bomb. I stood up, slowly, carefully, straightening my not quite expensive enough suit. Every eye in the room was on me now. Sarah's face showed satisfaction, thinking she'd delivered the killing blow, thinking I'd slink away into the night like the embarrassment she believed I was. I walked toward the head table, not rushing, not angry, just walking, like a man who'd finally decided it was time to stop carrying other people's secrets. "Sarah," I said, my voice carrying in the shocked silence. "If I'm dead to you, that's your choice. But before I go, there's something you should know." She looked annoyed now, like I was ruining her moment. "What could you possibly have to say that anyone here wants to hear?" I turned to face the room. 400 guests, the Harrisons, the investment bankers, the old money families, Sarah's colleagues from the hospital, everyone who'd just witnessed my public execution. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I'm not your father, not biologically." The room went even quieter. Sarah's face went white. James Harrison's expression changed from discomfort to something sharper. Interested. "Your mother Helen and I met when she was 3 months pregnant," I continued, my voice steady. "She'd been having an affair with a married man, a powerful man, a man who told her he couldn't leave his wife, who gave her money for an abortion and told her to disappear. Catherine Harrison had gone pale. James had gone very, very still. But Helen didn't want an abortion. She wanted you, Sarah. So she left Boston, came to my town, and we fell in love. I married her knowing I wasn't your biological father. I raised you as mine because I loved your mother, and I grew to love you more than I ever thought possible to love another human being." "Stop," Sarah said, but her voice was weak now. She looked at Marcus, at the Harrisons, at the guests, and I could see the panic starting to set in. "Your mother made me promise never to tell you. She said it didn't matter who contributed DNA, that family was built by actions, not biology. And I agreed. Until tonight, when you decided that biology was all that mattered, that shared DNA defined fatherhood. I turned to James Harrison, who was now standing, his face unreadable. "So let me introduce you to your real father," I said. "The man who got your mother pregnant and paid her to disappear. The man who's been living 5 miles away from us your entire life, who I saw at every school event where you performed, who I watched from a distance attending your medical school graduation." I paused, letting the tension build, watching the realization start to dawn on faces around the room. "Sarah," I said quietly, "your biological father is James Harrison, which means you just married your half-brother." The room exploded. Catherine Harrison fainted, literally collapsed into her chair, reaching for her husband with shaking hands. James stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Marcus looked like he'd been hit by a truck. And Sarah's perfect, composed face crumbled into absolute horror. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. You're lying. You're lying because I hurt you." I pulled out my phone, opened my email, pulled up the message I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, ever since Sarah had called to tell me about the seating arrangements, her voice cold and distant. "3 weeks ago," I said, "I drove to Boston and paid $299 for a private investigator. It took him 6 hours to find the paper trail. Hotel receipts from the Fairmont, where James Harrison maintained a suite 40 years ago. Credit card statements showing regular payments to Helen Morrison, your mother's maiden name. And then the final piece, medical records from a private clinic where your mother went for her first prenatal appointment, listing the baby's father as James Harrison." I forwarded the email to Sarah's phone, to Marcus's phone, to Catherine's phone, to the wedding planner, because why not spread the good news? The dates all match, I continued. April 1984. Your mother was working as a paralegal at a law firm that did business with Harrison Properties. You were born in January 1985. The math works, Sarah. The DNA will prove it. And you know what the funny thing is? I looked around the room at the faces showing shock, horror, fascination, disgust. James knew. He knew exactly who you were when Marcus brought you home. He knew when he mentored you, when he walked you down the aisle, when he accepted your toast calling him your real father. He knew you were his biological daughter, and he let you marry his son anyway. James Harrison finally found his voice. This is insane. This is slander. I'll have my lawyers prove it. I finished for him. Go ahead. Let's do a DNA test right now. There are 400 witnesses here. Let's settle this publicly, since Sarah likes public declarations so much. Catherine was sobbing now, great heaving sobs. Marcus had backed away from Sarah like she was contaminated. Sarah herself stood paralyzed, her perfect wedding dress suddenly looking like a costume, her perfect new life disintegrating around her. But I wasn't done. You want to know why I never told you? I asked Sarah. Why I kept this secret even when you started treating me like garbage? Because your mother begged me. Because Helen looked at you, her precious baby girl, and decided that protecting you was more important than truth. She made me swear that you'd never know you were the product of a rich man's affair, that you'd never carry the shame she felt. My voice broke then, just a little. And I kept that promise for 25 years. Through every sacrifice, every late night, every time you looked at me with love in your eyes as a child. I kept it when you started pulling away. I kept it when you introduced me as Robert instead of Dad. I kept it when you put me at table 17 at your own wedding. I looked at James Harrison, who'd sunk back into his chair, his face gray. But you broke something in me tonight, Sarah. When you stood up with that microphone and tried to erase me from existence, you broke the last thread of loyalty I owed your mother's memory. Because Helen was wrong. Truth matters. And you deserve to know that the man you've been calling a father figure for 3 years is actually your father. And the man you just married is your half-brother. The silence was absolute. Even the orchestra had stopped playing. Waiters stood frozen with champagne bottles. The room had become a tableau of shock and horror, every face turned toward the unfolding catastrophe. Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair, her hands over her face. Marcus was backing toward the exit, his best man following, both of them looking like they wanted to be anywhere but here. Catherine Harrison was being attended to by several guests, someone calling for a doctor. And James Harrison met my eyes across the room, and I saw something there. Not shame, not regret. Recognition. The acknowledgement that he'd gambled everything on me staying silent, and he'd lost. How long have you known? Marcus's voice was hoarse. He was looking at his father now. Dad, how long have you known Sarah was your daughter? James didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The guilt on his face was confession enough. Oh my God, Marcus said. You knew, when I brought her home, when I proposed, when we planned this wedding. You knew, and you let it happen. It's not, James started, but Catherine cut him off. Not what, James? Not like it sounds? Not as bad as it seems? Her voice was pure ice. You let our son marry his half-sister. You let this wedding happen. You walked her down the aisle knowing... She couldn't finish. Just stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the reception hall. A dozen guests followed her, the exodus beginning. I turned back to Sarah one last time. She was looking at me now, really looking at me. And I saw something I hadn't seen in 3 years. She saw me. Not Robert the embarrassment, not the man from her old life she'd outgrown. She saw the man who'd raised her, who'd protected her, who'd loved her enough to let her hate him. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Your mother made me promise to protect you. But tonight, you forced me to choose between her memory and your conscience. You needed to know the truth before this marriage was consummated, before there were children, before the lie got any bigger. You could have told me privately," she whispered. "Could I? When you won't take my calls, when you blocked my number, when the only way I could reach you was through your Aunt Linda. You made this public, Sarah. You stood up with that microphone and destroyed me in front of 400 people. So yes, I told the truth publicly. Maybe that was wrong. But I'm just a community college professor, not the sophisticated person you've become. I don't know the rules of your new world." I picked up my coat from table 17. Linda was crying, hugging Dr. Ellis. Tom Chen nodded at me, something like respect in his eyes. "For what it's worth," I said to the room, to Sarah, to anyone still listening, "I would have taken that secret to my grave if you'd just let me be your father. Not your biological father, not your DNA donor, just your dad, the man who loved you. But you didn't want that man in your life. So now you have the truth instead." I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Sarah crying, really crying. Maybe for the first time since her mother died. I heard Marcus arguing with James, heard Catherine's name being called by Harrison relatives trying to smooth over the catastrophe. I heard the inevitable buzz of 400 people who would be dining out on this story for months. And I heard one more thing, Sarah's voice, broken and small, calling out, "Daddy." Not Robert, not the formal, distant name she'd been using. Daddy, the name she hadn't used since she was 12 years old. I stopped, my hand on the door, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to go to her, to fix this somehow. But I didn't, because some lessons can only be learned through consequences. Some betrayals can only be understood through loss. "I love you, Sarah," I said without turning around. "I always have. I always will. But I can't save you from this. You have decisions to make now. About your marriage, about your relationship with the Harrisons, about who you want to be. And for the first time in your life, I can't protect you from the consequences." I walked out into the night. Behind me, the beautiful wedding reception descended into chaos. Ahead of me, there was just the parking lot and my 15-year-old Honda and the long drive home to my small house with its second-hand furniture and its rooms full of memories of a little girl who used to love me. Would you have done what I did? Would you have kept that secret? Or would you have told the truth sooner? Let me know in the comments because I'm still not sure I made the right choice. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text messages. "Linda, where are you? Sarah is asking for you." Tom Chen. "That took guts, Robert." Dr. Ellis. "I'm so sorry you had to do that." And then, an hour later, after I'd driven halfway home, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Marcus. We need to talk. The marriage isn't legal. We're having it annulled. Sarah is... She's asking about you, about how to fix this." I pulled over at a rest stop, my hands shaking. Read the message again. Typed and deleted 3 different responses. Finally settled on, Tell her I'm home when she's ready to talk. Tell her I'm always home. Because that's what parents do, isn't it? We're there, even when our kids don't want us, even when they hurt us, even when they try to erase us from their lives. We're there, waiting, hoping that someday they'll remember who really loved them. But here's the thing that kept me awake that night, staring at my ceiling, replaying the evening's catastrophe over and over. I hadn't just revealed Sarah's paternity. I hadn't just destroyed her marriage and exposed James Harrison's decades-old secret. I'd opened a door that couldn't be closed. Because if Helen had lied about Sarah's father, what else had she lied about? What other secrets had my late wife taken to her grave? And why, in all those years, had James Harrison never tried to contact his biological daughter? Had he really been monitoring her from a distance, or had he genuinely forgotten about the pregnant paralegal he'd paid off until Marcus brought her home? These were questions I'd been avoiding for 3 weeks, ever since the private investigator handed me that file. Questions that I'd have to face now that the truth was out in the open. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. Sarah's number. My thumb hovered over the accept button. Should I answer, or should I let her sit with the consequences a little longer? Should I be the father who always answers, or the man who finally had enough? That's where I'll leave it for now. Part 2 is coming, where I'll tell you what happened when I finally answered that phone call, what Sarah discovered about her mother's past, and how James Harrison's secret turned out to be even darker than anyone imagined. Because here's what I learned that night. The truth doesn't set you free. The truth just shows you which cage you've been living in all along. I sat in my car at that rest stop for 20 minutes, Sarah's name glowing on my phone screen, the call ringing and ringing before going to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By the 4th call, I realized she wasn't going to stop. I answered. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, broken, nothing like the confident surgeon who'd stood at that microphone and declared me dead to her. "Daddy, please, I need you." Those 4 words. After 3 years of Robert, after tonight's public execution, after everything she'd done to erase me from her life, she needed me. You want to know what unconditional love feels like? It feels like your heart breaking and healing at the same time. It feels like every instinct screaming at you to protect your child, even when that child tried to destroy you. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm in the bridal suite. Marcus left. His parents left. Everyone left. Aunt Linda is here, but I need you. I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me grow up thinking you were my father?" "Because I am your father, Sarah. Biology doesn't change that." Silence. Then, "Can you come back? Please? I need to hear the whole story. I need to know everything about my mother, about James Harrison, about all of it." I looked at my dashboard clock. 11:47 p.m. The reception venue was 40 minutes back the way I'd come. I was exhausted, emotionally destroyed, and every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to go home, to let Sarah sit with the consequences, to protect myself for once. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, I said, because that's what fathers do, even when it hurts, even when it's not fair, even when you've earned the right to walk away. The venue looked different when I pulled back into the parking lot. The valet was gone. The beautiful lighting that had made the building glow like a fairy tale was dimmed. Through the windows, I could see staff cleaning up the wreckage of the reception, moving tables, collecting abandoned champagne glasses, dismantling the dream wedding that had become a nightmare. Linda met me at the door. Her eyes were red from crying, but she hugged me hard. "She's upstairs in the bridal suite," Linda said. "Robert, I'm so sorry. I knew Helen was pregnant when she met you, but I thought—" Helen told me the father was some random guy from a bar. I never knew it was James Harrison. If I'd known, if I'd had any idea. "It's not your fault," I told her. "Helen protected her secrets well. Sarah's devastated, completely shattered, and Marcus—" Linda shook her head. "He's talking to lawyers. The marriage has to be annulled. They can't be married. Not after this." I climbed the stairs to the bridal suite, each step feeling heavier than the last. What was I going to say to her? How do you explain 25 years of lies, even lies told with good intentions? Sarah was sitting on the floor in her wedding dress, her back against the wall, her professional makeup running down her face. The beautiful Vera Wang gown was crumpled and stained. Her carefully styled hair had come loose. She looked like a child playing dress-up in clothes that didn't fit anymore. "Tell me," she said when she saw me. "Not hello, not I'm sorry, just tell me." I sat down across from her, my back against the opposite wall, my 67-year-old knees protesting, and I told her everything. "Your mother was 23 when she met James Harrison. She was working as a paralegal at Whitmore and Associates, a law firm that handled contracts for Harrison Properties. She was brilliant, beautiful, and ambitious. James was 32, married for 5 years to Catherine, and already building his real estate empire." Sarah wiped her eyes, listening. They had an affair that lasted about 8 months. Helen thought he was going to leave Catherine for her. He thought she understood it was just physical, just convenient. When Helen got pregnant, James gave her $50,000 and told her to get an abortion and disappear. He said if she tried to claim paternity, he'd destroy her career, her reputation, everything. "So she left Boston," Sarah whispered. "She left Boston. She moved to a small town 3 hours away, got a job at a local law office, and tried to figure out what to do. That's where we met. I was teaching summer classes at the community college, and she came to audit my biology course. She said she wanted to understand how pregnancy worked, how the baby was developing inside her. I smiled at the memory. She was 5 months along when I asked her out for coffee, 6 months when I told her I loved her, 7 months when I proposed. I knew the baby wasn't mine, Sarah. Helen was honest about that from the start. But I didn't care. I fell in love with your mother, and I was going to love her child. "Did you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Raising someone else's kid?" "Never. Not once. You want to know why?" I leaned forward. "Because 5 minutes after you were born, the nurse put you in my arms, and you grabbed my finger with your tiny hand. You looked up at me with those huge eyes. And I knew you were mine in every way that mattered." Fresh tears rolled down Sarah's face. "Then why did she make you keep it secret? If James Harrison was such a terrible person, why protect him?" "She wasn't protecting him. She was protecting you." I pulled out the folder I'd brought from my car, the private investigator's file. 3 weeks ago, when you called to tell me about the seating arrangements at your wedding, when you made it clear I was an embarrassment you were tolerating out of obligation, I made a decision. I hired a private investigator to find proof of what your mother had told me. Proof I'd never sought before because I trusted her. I opened the folder. What I found was worse than I expected. Inside were documents, hotel receipts, bank statements, but also newspaper clippings, police reports, and medical records. James Harrison didn't just have an affair with your mother, he had a pattern. Between 1978 and 1995, there were at least 6 women who worked for companies associated with Harrison Properties who filed complaints. Sexual harassment, coercion. In 2 cases, there were settlements paid out quietly. In one case, the woman disappeared before the case went to trial. Sarah's face went white. "What do you mean, disappeared?" Jennifer Caldwell. She was a junior architect at a firm Harrison hired in 1982. She had an affair with him, got pregnant, threatened to go public. She accepted a settlement of $75,000, signed an NDA, and was never seen again. Police investigated, but Harrison had alibis, lawyers, and enough money to make the investigation go away. I handed Sarah the newspaper clipping. Missing woman case. Goes cold. Family still searching. Your mother knew about Jennifer Caldwell. The paralegal network in Boston was small, and word got around. When James gave Helen that money, when he told her to disappear, Helen understood it wasn't just a suggestion, it was a threat. So she left Boston, changed her routines, used her maiden name for everything, and made me promise never to tell you who your biological father was. Because she thought he might come after us, Sarah said slowly. Because she knew he had the resources to destroy anyone who threatened his carefully constructed life. James Harrison was building an empire in the 1980s. He couldn't afford scandals, couldn't afford paternity suits, couldn't afford women talking about his affairs. So he paid them off or scared them off or worse. Sarah stared at the documents spread across the floor. But he let me into his life. He mentored me. He walked me down the aisle. Why would he do that if he was worried about exposure? That's what I've been trying to figure out. I pulled out another document. I think James Harrison has been keeping tabs on you your entire life. Look at this. It was a series of photographs, grainy surveillance-style images. Sarah at her high school graduation, Sarah's acceptance letter to Princeton, Sarah's medical school white coat ceremony. Each photo had a date stamp and a notation in the corner. Subject confirmed, no contact made. Someone was watching you, documenting your life, making sure you were safe or making sure you weren't going to become a problem. Maybe both. Sarah's hands trembled as she looked through the photos. This is insane. Why would he do this? Because you're his daughter. Because maybe, despite everything, he felt some twisted sense of responsibility. Or because he was paranoid that Helen had told you the truth and you'd eventually come after his money, his reputation, his family. And then I started dating Marcus, Sarah whispered. Oh God, he knew. When Marcus brought me home for the first time, James knew exactly who I was. He knew, and he made a choice. He could have told Marcus the truth, could have ended the relationship immediately. Instead, he let it continue. He encouraged it. He welcomed you into his family knowing you were his biological daughter, knowing you and Marcus shared DNA. Why would he do that? Sarah's voice rose. What kind of sick person lets their daughter marry their son? I had a theory, but it was dark. Too dark to say out loud without being sure. But Sarah deserved the truth, all of it. I think James Harrison saw an opportunity. If you married Marcus, if you became part of the Harrison family legally, you'd be bound to them. You'd have a vested interest in protecting the family secrets, protecting James's reputation. You'd never be able to expose him without destroying yourself. Sarah stared at me. He was neutralizing me, making me complicit. That's one theory. The other theory is worse. Tell me. I hesitated, but Sarah's eyes demanded honesty. James Harrison has no male heirs besides Marcus. His entire empire, everything he's built, goes to Marcus when he dies. But what if he wanted another option? Another biological child in the family? Someone brilliant and accomplished like you, who could help run the company, who could ensure the Harrison legacy continues. By marrying us to each other, by binding his two biological children together legally. Sarah looked sick. That's medieval. That's monstrous. That's what happens when men like James Harrison decide other people are chess pieces instead of human beings. We sat in silence, the weight of it all pressing down. Everything Sarah thought she knew about her life, her family, her marriage, was a lie. And I'd been the one to shatter it all. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "I know this hurts. I know you're angry. But you needed to know before the marriage was consummated, before there were children, before I was trapped," Sarah finished. "You saved me. Again. Like you've been saving me my whole life, and I was too stupid and selfish to see it." "Don't do that. Don't beat yourself up. You're 25 years old. You fell in love with a man from a world I could never give you. You wanted parents who fit that world. That's human, Sarah. It's not evil. I called you dead to me, in front of 400 people. Yeah, that hurt." I tried to smile. "But I've been hurt before. I survived your teenage years when you screamed that you hated me, because I wouldn't let you go to that party. This was just a really public version of that." Sarah laughed, a broken sound that turned into a sob. "How can you joke? How can you not hate me? Because you're my daughter, because I changed your diapers and taught you to read and sat through every single one of your school plays, even when you forgot your lines. Because I held your hand when your mother died and you cried yourself to sleep every night for a month. Because I'm your father, Sarah. Not James Harrison. Me." She crawled across the floor and collapsed into my arms, sobbing like she hadn't sobbed since she was 8 years old. I held her, this brilliant surgeon in her ruined wedding dress, and let her cry out all the pain and shock and grief of a life that had just exploded. "What do I do now?" she whispered eventually. "How do I fix this?" "You can't fix it. You can only move forward. The marriage will be annulled. Marcus will need therapy, probably. You'll need therapy, definitely. James Harrison will need to face his past, though men like him rarely do. And you'll need to figure out who you are without the Harrison name, without the fantasy family you thought you'd found. Will you help me? Even after everything I did." I kissed the top of her head, like I used to when she was small. "I've been helping you your whole life. I'm not going to stop now." The door opened. Linda poked her head in. "Robert, there's someone here to see you. Catherine Harrison. She's downstairs and she's asking to speak with you alone." Sarah tensed. "Don't. She'll blame you for everything. I need to talk to her," I said gently. "She deserves answers, too. She's been married to James for 40 years, and she just found out her entire marriage was built on lies." I found Catherine Harrison in what had been the reception hall, now emptied of guests and decorations. She sat alone at the head table, still in her mother-of-the-groom dress, her makeup perfect despite everything. She looked like a queen surveying the ruins of her kingdom. "Mrs. Harrison," I said. "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell." Her voice was ice. "We need to talk." I sat across from her, the same seat where James Harrison had been when the bomb dropped. "Did you plan this?" she asked. "Did you wake up this morning and decide to destroy my family at my son's wedding?" "No. I woke up this morning hoping I'd get through the day without crying. I had low expectations, honestly." She didn't smile. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Marcus is devastated. The marriage will have to be annulled, which means explaining to 400 guests, to business associates, to everyone we know, why my son's marriage lasted less than 4 hours. My husband's reputation will be destroyed. Harrison Properties' stock will tank when this gets out. Lawsuits will start flying." "Good," I said simply. Catherine's eyes flashed. "Good? You think destroying innocent people is good?" "I think the truth is good. I think stopping a marriage between half-siblings before they consummate it is good. I think exposing a man who's been harassing and threatening women for 40 years is good. Mrs. Harrison, I'm sorry you're collateral damage, but your husband is a predator who's been buying his way out of consequences for decades. You have no proof of that." I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and slid it across the table. 3 weeks of investigation, 6 women besides Sarah's mother, 2 settlements, 1 disappearance, police reports that were buried, hospital records showing suspicious injuries, bank transfers showing hush money. I have proof, Mrs. Harrison. So much proof that when this folder gets to the right journalists, James Harrison won't be able to buy his way out. Catherine looked at the screen, her face paling as she scrolled. Jennifer Caldwell. Oh God, I remember her. She went missing in 1983. They never found her. Your husband's lawyers made sure they never found her. You think James killed her? Catherine's voice cracked. I think James made her disappear. Whether he did it himself or paid someone, I don't know. But she threatened his empire, and she vanished, just like he tried to make Helen disappear. The only difference is Helen had the sense to run far enough and hide well enough. Catherine's hands shook as she put down my phone. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know any of this. But you suspected something. Wives always do. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, there were late nights, unexplained expenses, women who looked at him at company parties with expressions I couldn't quite read. But I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself James was just an ambitious man who worked hard and played hard. I told myself a lot of lies because it was easier than facing the truth. I understand that impulse. I've told myself plenty of lies over the years. Catherine stood up, smoothing her dress, regaining her composure. What happens now? Are you going to the press, to the police? That depends on James. If he comes clean, if he faces what he's done, if he makes amends to the women he hurt, then maybe I keep this folder to myself. But if he tries to blame Sarah, if he tries to spin this as some kind of con or scheme, if he goes after her or me legally, you'll burn him down, Catherine finished. I'll burn him down. She nodded slowly. I think I'm going to divorce him. After 40 years, I think I'm finally done believing the lies. I'm sorry. Don't be. You freed me too, Mr. Mitchell. You freed all of us from living in James's carefully constructed fantasy world. She paused at the door. Sarah is lucky to have you as a father. I hope she realizes that now. After Catherine left, I sat alone in the empty reception hall. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. My father wants to meet with you. Tomorrow. His office. He's asking, but I think it's a demand. He says he'll explain everything. I texted back. Tell him I'll be there at 10 a.m. And Marcus, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this." His response came quickly. "Neither did Sarah. Neither did you. My father has a lot to answer for." I went back upstairs. Sarah had changed out of her wedding dress and into jeans and a sweatshirt Linda had brought. She looked young, vulnerable, nothing like the polished surgeon who'd tried to erase me from her life. "James wants to meet tomorrow," I told her. "I'm going to hear what he has to say." "I'm coming with you," Sarah said immediately. "Sarah? No. He's my biological father. He owes me an explanation. He owes us both one." Her jaw set in that stubborn line I knew so well, the one that said there was no point arguing. "Fine, but I do the talking. And if things get ugly, we leave. Agreed?" "Agreed." Linda drove Sarah back to my house. Her apartment was technically Marcus's apartment, paid for by the Harrisons, and she couldn't face going back there. We set her up in her old bedroom, the one I'd kept exactly as she'd left it when she went to college. The walls still had her science fair ribbons, her debate team trophies, her acceptance letter to Princeton framed on the wall. She stood in the doorway, looking around. "You kept it. After I stopped coming home, after I started treating you like garbage, you kept my room exactly the same." "Of course I did. You're my daughter. This is your home. It always will be." That night I lay in bed listening to Sarah cry in her old room, the same way I'd listened 20 years ago when Helen died. The same helpless feeling washed over me. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't make the pain go away. All I could do was be there, be present, be the father she needed even when she didn't know she needed one. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "You don't know what you've started. Stop now while you still can." I stared at the message. Was it from James? From someone James hired? Or from one of the other people who wanted Helen's secret to stay buried? I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, I'd face James Harrison. Tomorrow I'd get answers. Tomorrow, I'd find out just how deep the lies went. But tonight, Sarah was home. My daughter was sleeping in her childhood bed, safe under my roof, and for the first time in 3 years, that was enough. What would you do if you received that threatening message? Would you back down to protect yourself or push forward to expose the truth? Let me know, because tomorrow's meeting with James Harrison is going to determine everything. Harrison Properties occupied the top 3 floors of the Hancock Tower in downtown Boston. I'd driven past this building 1,000 times over the years, never imagining I'd one day walk through those polished glass doors to confront the man who owned it. Sarah sat beside me in my old Honda, silent, pale, wearing a simple black dress that made her look like she was going to a funeral. Maybe she was. The funeral of everything she'd believed about her life. "You don't have to do this," I said as we pulled into the visitor parking garage. "You could wait in the car. Let me handle James alone. He's my biological father. I need to hear this from him." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I need to look him in the eye and ask him why. Why he let me marry Marcus. Why he's been watching me my whole life. Why he didn't just leave us alone. The elevator ride to the 43rd floor was silent, except for the soft jazz playing overhead. The lobby was all marble and mahogany, with Harrison's corporate logo etched in gold on the wall. A receptionist who probably made more than I did in a year smiled professionally at us. "Robert Mitchell and Dr. Sarah Mitchell to see Mr. Harrison," I said. Her smile faltered slightly when she heard Sarah's name, but she recovered quickly. Mr. Harrison is expecting you. Conference room A, down the hall to your left. James Harrison sat alone at the head of a conference table that could seat 20. He'd aged overnight. The powerful, commanding man who'd walked Sarah down the aisle yesterday looked diminished, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose, his face gray with exhaustion. He stood when we entered. "Sarah, Robert, thank you for coming." "We didn't come for you," Sarah said coldly. "We came for answers." James gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit. I owe you both an explanation." We sat across from him, Sarah ramrod straight, radiating anger. I'd brought the private investigator's folder, and I placed it on the table between us like a weapon. "Before you start explaining," I said, "I want you to know that this folder contains enough evidence to destroy you. 6 women you harassed or assaulted, 2 settlements, 1 disappearance, bank records, police reports. If you lie to us today, if you try to manipulate or threaten Sarah, this folder goes to the Boston Globe, the police, and the SEC." James looked at the folder like it was a bomb. "I'm not here to lie. I'm here to tell you the truth. All of it. Because you're right, Robert. I've been running from the truth for 40 years, and it's finally caught up with me." He took a deep breath. "Helen Morrison was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. That's not an excuse, just a fact. She walked into my office in 1984 to deliver contract documents, and I was obsessed. I pursued her for weeks. She resisted at first. She knew I was married, but I was persistent, relentless. I used every advantage I had, my power, my money, my position, to break down her resistance." Sarah's jaw clenched, but she stayed silent. "We had an affair for 8 months. I told myself it was just physical, that it didn't mean anything. But Helen fell in love with me. She believed me when I said I'd leave Catherine. She believed all my lies." "And when she got pregnant?" I asked. I panicked. My father had just died, and I'd inherited control of Harrison Properties. I was 32 years old, running a $100 million company, married to Catherine, whose family connections were essential to my business. A pregnant mistress was a catastrophe, so I did what I'd been taught to do. I threw money at the problem. $50,000, Sarah said quietly. "That's what you thought my life was worth." James flinched. "I told Helen to get an abortion. I told her if she tried to claim paternity, I'd destroy her. I had lawyers draft threats. I had private investigators follow her. I made sure she understood that fighting me would ruin her." He paused. What I didn't know was that Helen had copied documents from my office, contracts showing questionable deals, evidence of bribes I'd paid to city officials. She had an insurance policy against me. This was new. Helen had blackmail material. She told me she'd hidden it with instructions to release everything if anything happened to her. She said she'd disappear, have the baby, and keep quiet as long as I left her alone. James's voice cracked. "So, I did. I took the deal, and then I spent 25 years wondering about the child I'd forced her to raise alone." Sarah leaned forward. "You didn't just wonder. You had me followed. You have surveillance photos of my entire life." James nodded slowly. "I hired a private investigator to check on you periodically, just to make sure Helen had kept her word, that you were being raised quietly, that my secret was safe. But also," he stopped, struggling, "also because you were my daughter, my blood, and some part of me needed to know you were okay." "How touching," Sarah said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You cared enough to stalk me from a distance, but not enough to actually be a father. You're right. I was a coward. I chose my reputation, my business, my comfortable life over being a father to you. And then Marcus brought you home. The room went silent. I knew immediately, James continued. You have your mother's eyes, her smile, and you're the right age. I pulled up the old photos from the investigation, compared them to the woman sitting in my living room, and I knew my son was dating my daughter. And you said nothing, I said. You could have stopped it right there. You could have told Marcus the truth, ended the relationship, protected both your children. But you didn't. No, I didn't. James looked directly at Sarah. Because you were brilliant. You were everything I'd hoped a child of mine would be. Successful, driven, accomplished. And Marcus loved you. For the first time in his life, my son was truly happy, truly in love. How could I destroy that? By telling the truth, Sarah said. That's how. I convinced myself it would be okay, James said. I told myself that biology doesn't determine everything, that you and Marcus weren't raised as siblings, that maybe it was fine. I consulted lawyers quietly about the legal implications. I researched genetics about the risks if you had children together. Jesus Christ, I whispered. You were actually going to let them have children? The genetic risks aren't as high as people think, not for half-siblings who don't share a raised environment. I found studies, consulted geneticists anonymously. I told myself I could manage it, that I could protect you both. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. You're insane. You're actually insane. Probably, James agreed. Powerful men often are. We start believing we can control everything, that rules don't apply to us, that we can bend reality to our will. What about Jennifer Caldwell? I asked, pulling out the newspaper clipping. Did you bend reality for her too? James's face went pale. How did you? That was 40 years ago. She disappeared. She threatened to expose you. And she disappeared. Did you kill her, James? No. God, no. I didn't kill anyone. James stood, walked to the window, looked out at the Boston skyline he'd helped build. But I might as well have. Jennifer took the settlement money, signed the NDA, and then a week later she called me, drunk, saying she'd changed her mind. She was going to the press, going to the police, going to destroy me. He turned back to us. I told my head of security, a man named Vincent Russo. He was ex-military, ex-police, the kind of man who solved problems without asking questions. I told Vincent that Jennifer was a threat that needed to be neutralized. And he made her disappear, I said. He told me she'd been convinced to leave town permanently. He showed me a signed statement where she reaffirmed the NDA and accepted additional money to relocate to California. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know details. But Jennifer's sister kept calling, kept filing missing person reports, kept saying Jennifer would never just disappear like that. Because she didn't disappear voluntarily, Sarah said. Your security chief killed her. I don't know that. I've never known for sure. Vincent died in 2003, took his secrets with him. But yes, I suspect he did something permanent to Jennifer, and I let it happen by being willfully blind. The weight of that confession hung in the air. James Harrison, pillar of the Boston business community, philanthropist, father, husband, had let a woman be murdered to protect his reputation. Why are you telling us this? I asked. Why confess now? Because it's over. Catherine is filing for divorce. Marcus won't speak to me. My board of directors called an emergency meeting this morning to discuss my removal. The press has already started calling about irregularities at yesterday's wedding. And last night, I got a visit from someone I never expected to see again. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated 3 weeks ago. This arrived at my home the day before Sarah's wedding. I don't know how it got past security. It was just sitting on my desk when I came home from the rehearsal dinner. I read the letter. The handwriting was feminine, elegant, oddly familiar. My blood went cold. Dear James, by the time you read this, you'll know who Sarah really is. You'll know she's your daughter. You'll know that the secret we kept for 25 years is about to explode. I'm writing this from hospice, stage 4 cancer. I have maybe 3 months left, and I've spent every one of those days thinking about the choices I made, the lies I told, the life I built on foundations of fear and dishonesty. I protected you for 25 years. I kept Sarah away from you. I made Robert promise never to reveal your identity. And I did it because I was terrified of you, of what you might do to protect your precious reputation. But I'm not afraid anymore. Dead women can't be threatened. I've left instructions with someone I trust. If Sarah marries Marcus, if you let that wedding happen without telling them the truth, then everything I've kept hidden will be released. The documents I copied, the evidence of your corruption, the real story of what happened to Jennifer Caldwell, because yes, James, I know about her too. I know about all of them. You have one chance to be a real father, one chance to do the right thing, stop the wedding, tell Sarah the truth, or I'll destroy you from beyond the grave. Helen. I stared at the letter, my hands shaking. This is Helen's handwriting, but Helen died 17 years ago. James shook his head slowly. Read the date, 3 weeks ago. Robert, I'm so sorry, but your wife didn't die in that car accident. The room tilted. Sarah grabbed my arm, her face white. What? Helen Morrison Mitchell died in hospice in Providence, Rhode Island 3 weeks ago. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She'd been living under an assumed name for the past 17 years. James pulled out another document, a death certificate. Helen Morrison Mitchell, deceased March 15th, 3 days before Sarah's wedding. That's impossible, I whispered. We buried her. I buried my wife. Sarah was 8 years old. We had a funeral. We had a body. You had a Jane Doe that the state matched to Helen's missing person report, James said quietly. A woman who died in a car accident on the same route Helen was driving. Similar age, similar appearance. The body was too damaged for visual identification, and dental records were inconclusive. You wanted to believe it was Helen because the alternative was too painful. Sarah was crying now, silent tears running down her face. Mom was alive? Mom was alive this whole time, and she let me think she was dead? James handed her another envelope. She left this for you. It was with her lawyer, with instructions to deliver it to my office after she died. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in that same elegant handwriting. My dearest Sarah, by now you know I didn't die when you were 8. I know this will hurt you more than anything else in this entire mess, and I'm so sorry. After the Jennifer Caldwell situation, after I realized what James was capable of, I became paranoid. I thought he was having me followed, thought every strange car on our street was someone watching us. I started having panic attacks, barely sleeping, constantly terrified that James would decide I was a loose end that needed to be tied up. So I staged my death. I had help from my sister Linda, who's never forgiven me for what I put you through. We found a Jane Doe, a woman with no family, who died in a car accident. We bribed a morgue attendant to make a few documentation errors, and I disappeared. I watched you grow up from a distance, Sarah. I saw your science fair ribbons. I saw you get accepted to Princeton. I saw you become the brilliant doctor I always knew you'd be. And I saw Robert be the father I could never be as a mother, loving you completely, raising you perfectly. I told myself I was protecting you by staying away, that if James thought I was dead, he'd leave you alone. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was broken by fear and paranoia, and I chose safety over being your mother. When I learned you were dating Marcus Harrison, I knew James would figure out who you were, and I knew I had to do something. So I wrote that letter threatening him. But James called my bluff. He let the wedding proceed. And so I'm releasing everything, every document, every secret, every piece of evidence I've been holding for 25 years. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to be your mother. I'm sorry I left you with only Robert, though he turned out to be more parent than I ever was. I'm sorry for all of it. I loved you enough to stay away. I hope someday you'll understand. Mom. Sarah let the letter fall to the table. She looked at me with eyes full of betrayal and confusion and grief. Did you know? Did you know Mom was alive? No. My voice came out hoarse. Sarah, I swear to you, I thought she died in that accident. I mourned her. I grieved for 17 years. I had no idea. Linda knew, Sarah said. Aunt Linda has known this whole time. The pieces were falling into place. Linda's guilty looks at the wedding, the way she'd been so eager to support me, so ready to condemn James. She'd been carrying Helen's secret for 17 years. Helen's lawyer released everything to the press this morning, James said quietly. By tomorrow, the story will be everywhere. My affairs, the harassment, Jennifer Caldwell, the corruption in my business dealings. Helen documented everything. She's destroying me from beyond the grave, just like she promised. Good, Sarah said coldly. You deserve it. I do, James agreed. But Sarah, you need to understand something. That letter, that threat, it wasn't just about revenge. Helen was trying to protect you. She knew that if you married Marcus without knowing the truth, you'd be trapped, legally bound to the Harrison family, unable to expose me without destroying yourself. So she waited until 3 days before my wedding to release her information. Why not tell me years ago? Why not reach out to me herself? Because she was dying, and she was scared, and she'd been living in fear and paranoia for 17 years, I said quietly. Your mother wasn't perfect, Sarah. She made terrible choices, but she did it out of fear, out of a desperate need to keep you safe from James. And in the process, she abandoned me. She let me think I'd lost my mother when I was 8 years old. She let me grow up without her. Sarah's voice broke. What kind of mother does that? A terrified one, James said. One who'd seen what I was capable of. One who knew men like me don't let loose ends survive. The door to the conference room burst open. Catherine Harrison stood there, her lawyer beside her, her face hard as stone. I heard everything, she said. The office is wired for sound. I wanted to know what lies you'd tell them. James stood. Catherine, Shut up. I don't want to hear your voice ever again. She turned to Sarah and me. I'm testifying. To the police, to the SEC, to whoever needs to hear it. I've been keeping James's secrets for 40 years, making excuses, looking the other way. But I'm done. Jennifer Caldwell deserves justice. Helen Morrison deserves justice. All those women deserve justice. She placed a folder on the table, thicker than mine. Financial records, every bribe, every payoff, every illegal deal. I've been documenting everything for years, just in case. Now it's time to use it. James sank into his chair, defeated. The man who'd walked Sarah down the aisle 24 hours ago looked like he'd aged 20 years. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Criminal investigations," Catherine's lawyer said. "The SEC will freeze Harrison Properties' assets, criminal charges for obstruction of justice, possibly accessory to murder, if they can prove James knew what happened to Jennifer Caldwell, civil suits from the women he harassed. The company will likely be dissolved or sold. The Harrison family name will be toxic." "And Marcus?" Sarah asked quietly. "Marcus is cooperating fully," Catherine said. "He's giving depositions, turning over documents, doing everything he can to distance himself from his father's crimes. He asked me to tell you." She paused. "He asked me to tell you that he's sorry, that he loved you, that he still loves you, and that if things were different—" "But they're not different," Sarah said. "We're half-siblings. We can never be together. That's the reality." We left Harrison Properties an hour later, after giving statements to Catherine's lawyers, after signing documents, after watching James Harrison be escorted out of his own building by security. Sarah was silent in the elevator, silent in the parking garage, silent as we drove through Boston traffic. Finally, she spoke. "My mother was alive. My mother was alive for 17 years, and she never tried to contact me. She was sick, Sarah, mentally and then physically. The letter said—" "I don't care what the letter said. She abandoned me. She chose fear over being my mother." Sarah's voice was ice. "And James let me almost marry my half-brother to protect his reputation, and you're the only one who tried to stop any of this. I should have told you sooner. The moment you started dating Marcus, I should have. You kept a promise to my mother. You were being loyal to someone who didn't deserve loyalty. That's not your fault." We drove in silence until Sarah said, "I want to see her. I want to see where Mom is buried. The real grave, not the fake one we visit every year." "Linda will know where," I said. "We'll call her when we get home." But when we got home, Linda's car was already in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch steps, her face puffy from crying, a box of Helen's belongings beside her. "I'm so sorry," Linda said as we approached. "I'm so sorry for all of it. Helen made me promise. She said if I told anyone she was alive, James would find her. She was so scared, Robert, so paranoid and broken. I tried to convince her to contact you, to at least let Sarah know, but she wouldn't. She was convinced staying dead was the only way to keep you both safe." Sarah walked past Linda without a word, into the house, slamming the door behind her. Linda flinched. "She hates me," Linda said. "She should. I kept her mother from her for 17 years. "You kept Helen's secret because you loved your sister," I said. "I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it." Linda opened the box. Inside were photos, letters, Helen's journal. She wrote to you both, every week, letters she never sent, a whole life documented in words she was too scared to share. I took the box, heavy with 17 years of unsent love letters. Inside were hundreds of pages in Helen's handwriting, letters to Sarah describing her pride, her regret, her love. Letters to me explaining her choices, her fear, her endless apologies. She wanted you to have these after she died, Linda said. She wanted you to know she never stopped loving you, either of you. That night, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table, reading Helen's letters. Some made us cry, some made us angry. All of them showed a woman trapped by fear, making terrible choices, but never stopping loving her family. I don't know if I can forgive her, Sarah said finally. You don't have to, not right away. Maybe not, ever. I squeezed her hand. But we can try to understand her, and we can decide not to let her fear control us anymore. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. You were warned, now face the consequences. I showed Sarah. Someone doesn't want Helen's secrets coming out. Let them try, Sarah said, her jaw set. I'm done being scared. I'm done letting powerful men dictate my life. Whatever comes next, we face it together. What would you do with 17 years of unsent letters from a mother you thought was dead? Would you read them all, searching for understanding? Or would you burn them, too angry to forgive? The choice isn't easy, and Sarah's about to make one that will determine everything. Part 4 coming next, where the final secrets are revealed and justice finally arrives. Sarah spent 3 days reading Helen's letters. She'd lock herself in her old bedroom, emerging only for meals, her eyes red from crying. I didn't push. Grief has its own timeline, and Sarah was grieving twice. Once for the mother she thought she'd lost at 8, and once for the 17 years that mother had stolen from her. On the 4th morning, she came downstairs, holding a letter, her face pale. You need to read this, she said. The letter was dated 6 months before Helen's death. Her handwriting was shakier, the cancer already taking its toll. My dearest Sarah, there's one more truth I need to tell you, one I've carried alone for 26 years. I'm writing this now because the morphine makes me brave, and I'm running out of time to be a coward. James Harrison is not your biological father. I know what you're thinking. Everything Robert revealed at your wedding, all the DNA evidence, the timeline, it all pointed to James. But I lied to James too. I let him believe he'd gotten me pregnant. I let him pay me off, threaten me, monitor me for 25 years, all for a child that wasn't even his. Your real father was a man named Daniel Moreno. He was a contract lawyer at the firm where I worked, married, with 2 kids. We had a brief affair 3 weeks before I started seeing James. When I realized I was pregnant, I ran the dates. It was Daniel's child, not James's. But Daniel had just made partner. His wife was pregnant with their 3rd child. He had everything to lose. James Harrison, on the other hand, was a powerful man with a pattern of affairs and payoffs. He was the perfect scapegoat. So, I let James believe the baby was his. I took his money, accepted his threats, and disappeared. And I let you grow up thinking your biological father was a wealthy real estate mogul instead of a contract lawyer who couldn't even remember my name. I'm telling you this now because James has suffered enough for his real sins. He doesn't need to carry the burden of being your father, too. Daniel Moreno is retired now, living in Vermont with his wife. I've left his contact information with Linda in case you want to meet the man who actually gave you life. I'm sorry for this final lie. I'm sorry for all the lies. I built my entire existence on deception and fear, and I'm leaving you to sort through the wreckage. Love, Mom. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking. This changes everything. James Harrison isn't my biological father, Sarah said quietly. Which means Marcus and I aren't related. Which means the marriage could have been legal. Which means your mother destroyed James's life, destroyed the wedding, destroyed everything, based on a lie she told 26 years ago. Sarah sank into a chair. Mom let James think he'd fathered his own granddaughter. She let him torture himself for 25 years, monitoring me, watching me date his son, struggling with whether to tell the truth. And it was all a lie. We have to tell James, I said, and Marcus, and Catherine. They deserve to know. Do they? James is still guilty of everything else. The harassment, Jennifer Caldwell, the corruption. Maybe he deserves to go down thinking he let his daughter marry his son. Sarah, I know we have to tell them. But part of me wants him to suffer for everything he did, even if he's suffering for something he didn't actually do. I understood that impulse, but Helen's final lie was too big to keep. If Marcus knows you're not related, if the genetic testing proves it, then the marriage doesn't have to be annulled. The relationship could continue if you both wanted it to. I don't want it to, Sarah said firmly. Marcus is a good man, but our entire relationship was built on lies. His father manipulated us. My mother manipulated everyone. I can't untangle what was real from what was performance. I need to start over, completely. We drove back to Boston that afternoon. James had been released on bail, confined to his home, his assets frozen, his empire crumbling around him. Catherine had moved out, taking Marcus with her, but James agreed to see us when I called. The Harrison mansion in Brookline looked different in daylight, less impressive, more empty. James answered the door himself. No staff, no security, just a tired old man in a sweatshirt and jeans. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I assume there's been a development?" We sat in his library, surrounded by leather-bound books and the trappings of wealth that couldn't protect him anymore. Sarah handed him Helen's letter. James read it slowly, his face going through a series of emotions, shock, relief, anger, and finally something like bitter laughter. She played me. For 26 years, Helen Morrison played me perfectly. He looked at Sarah. "You're not my daughter, you're not my blood, and I've spent 2.5 decades monitoring, protecting, and eventually betraying someone who had nothing to do with me." "You're still guilty of everything else," Sarah said coldly. "The harassment, the affairs, Jennifer Caldwell. This doesn't absolve you." "I know, but it means Marcus can stop hating himself for falling in love with his half-sister. It means you can stop carrying the shame of almost committing incest. It means Helen's final revenge, letting me believe I'd done something truly unforgivable, was based on a lie. She was protecting Daniel Moreno, I said. She let you be the villain so the real father could keep his perfect life. James stood, walked to his window, overlooking the manicured gardens. "I was already the villain, Robert. Maybe I deserved to be played. Maybe this was cosmic justice for all the women I'd used and discarded over the years. Helen just made sure I paid the highest possible price." We left him there, staring at his garden, contemplating the ruins of his life. On the way out, we ran into Marcus, who'd come to pick up some belongings. "Sarah," he said, awkward, in pain. "I heard you were here. Are you okay?" "I'm going to be," Sarah said. "Marcus, there's something you need to know." She told him about Helen's letter, about Daniel Moreno, about the fact that they weren't related after all. Marcus's face went through the same shock-relief cycle his father's had. "We could still be together," he said quietly. "If we're not related, the marriage could stand. We could try again, start over with the truth this time. Sarah took his hand gently. Marcus, you're a good man. You deserve someone who loves you without complications, without all this history and pain. That's not me. Maybe it never was. We got caught up in fairy tales, in the idea of the perfect wedding and the perfect life, but none of it was real. Some of it was real, Marcus said. I really loved you. I know, and I cared about you. But loving someone isn't enough when the foundation is this broken. We need to let each other go. They hugged, a final goodbye, and Marcus left carrying a box of his childhood belongings. Sarah watched him go, tears on her cheeks, mourning not just the marriage, but the future she'd imagined. The legal proceedings took 6 months. James Harrison was charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and a dozen financial crimes. The Jennifer Caldwell case was reopened, though without Vincent Russo alive to testify, prosecutors couldn't prove murder. James eventually took a plea deal, 10 years in federal prison, forfeiture of most of his assets, and victim compensation payments to the women he'd harassed. Catherine divorced him, took back her maiden name, and started a foundation to help women escaping powerful abusers. Marcus sold his stake in Harrison Properties, donated half to his mother's foundation, and moved to Oregon to start over. Linda apologized 1,000 times, eventually reconciling with Sarah after months of family therapy. And me? I went back to my small house, my teaching job at the community college, my quiet life. Except it wasn't quite so quiet anymore. Sarah moved back home. Not forever, but long enough to heal, to figure out who she was without the Harrison influence, without her mother's lies, without all the identities people had tried to force on her. She started therapy, processed her grief, and slowly rebuilt herself from the ground up. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Sarah and I took a road trip to Vermont. Daniel Moreno had agreed to meet us, nervous and confused by the letter Linda had forwarded from Helen. He was a kind-faced man in his 70s, with Sarah's nose, her smile, her quick intelligence. His wife, Susan, sat beside him, holding his hand, having decided to face this particular truth together. I barely remember your mother, Daniel admitted. It was a 3-week affair 26 years ago. I'm not proud of it, but I never knew she was pregnant. If I had... What would you have done? Sarah asked. Daniel looked at his wife, at his life, at the choices he'd made. I don't know. Probably nothing. I was a coward. I chose comfort and security over integrity. I'm sorry you grew up without knowing me, but I can't pretend I would have been brave enough to step up if I'd known. At least you're honest, Sarah said. That's more than most people in this story managed. We spent an afternoon with Daniel and Susan, sharing stories, filling in gaps, building a tentative connection. Sarah exchanged contact information with her half-siblings, made plans to meet them someday. But when we left Vermont, she seemed lighter somehow, less burdened. I have 2 biological fathers, she said as we drove home. One was a predator who terrorized my mother. One was a coward who forgot she existed. And then I have you, the man who chose to be my father, who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me, who loved me even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserved it, I said. No, I didn't. I was a brat. I was ashamed of you. I tried to erase you from my life, and you still came back when I needed you. That's what fathers do. That's what real fathers do, Sarah corrected. Biology doesn't make you a father. Love does. Commitment does. Showing up every day, even when it's hard, even when your kid is being terrible. That's what makes you a father. I had to pull over because I was crying too hard to drive safely. Sarah hugged me, and for the first time in 3 years, it felt right. We were father and daughter again, not because DNA said so, not because legal documents said so, but because we chose each other. A year after the wedding, Sarah moved to Seattle. She'd been offered a position at Children's Hospital, working with a research team developing new surgical techniques for pediatric heart defects. It was everything she'd worked for, everything she deserved, and she'd gotten it on her own merit, not because of the Harrison name or connections. Before she left, we had dinner at our old kitchen table in the house where she'd grown up. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for raising me, for protecting me, for being the father I needed, not the one I thought I wanted." "I'd do it all again," I told her. "Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of worry. You were worth all of it." "I'm going to be okay," she said. "I'm going to build a life that's really mine, based on truth and hard work and choices I make consciously. No more fairy tales. No more pretending to be someone I'm not." "I'm proud of you," I said. "I've always been proud of you, even when you didn't want me to be." The day she left for Seattle, I stood in her empty bedroom, looking at the debate trophies and science fair ribbons and the acceptance letter to Princeton still framed on the wall. This room had been her sanctuary as a child, her prison as a teenager when she'd felt trapped by our modest life, and finally her refuge when everything else fell apart. My phone buzzed. Sarah, already at the airport. "Love you, Dad. Thank you for being my real father. Biology doesn't matter. You do." I texted back, "Love you too, sweetheart. Go build something amazing." And she would, because that's who Sarah was, someone who could survive betrayal and lies and the collapse of everything she'd believed and come out stronger. She got that resilience from Helen, whether she wanted to admit it or not. But she got her integrity from growing up in this house, learning that character matters more than wealth, that truth matters more than convenience, that love is a choice you make every day. The threatening texts stopped after James was convicted. Whoever had been sending them, whether it was one of James's associates or someone connected to Vincent Russo or just a random person enjoying the chaos, gave up once there was nothing left to protect. I never did find out who sent those messages. Maybe it's better that way. Some mysteries don't need solutions. 6 months after Sarah moved to Seattle, I got a call from Catherine Harrison. She was planning a gala for her foundation, wanted to honor the people who'd helped expose James's crimes. She asked if I'd accept an award for courage. I declined. I didn't need awards or recognition. I'd done what any father would do, protected my daughter from a man who saw people as chess pieces. That's not courage, that's just love. But I did donate the $50,000 Helen had extorted from James 26 years ago. I'd kept it in a separate account all these years, never touched it, never felt right using it. Now it could help other women escape the James Harrisons of the world. Catherine accepted the donation and told me Marcus was doing well in Oregon. He'd started a non-profit building affordable housing, using his real estate knowledge for good, trying to atone for his father's sins. He asked about Sarah sometimes, hoped she was happy. Catherine said he'd started dating a teacher he met at a community event, someone with no connection to the Harrison world, someone real. I was glad for him. Marcus had been a victim too, caught in the crossfire of his father's depravity and my daughter's justifiable rage. These days, I still teach biology at the community college, still drive my old Honda, still live in my small house with its second-hand furniture. Nothing about my external life has changed, but everything inside has. I know now that being a father isn't about biology. It's not about providing wealth or status or connections. It's about showing up. It's about loving your child even when they hurt you. It's about telling the truth even when lies would be easier. It's about being the person they can count on when their world falls apart. Sarah calls me every Sunday. We talk about her research, her new friends in Seattle, the life she's building. She never mentions Marcus or James or the Harrison world she almost became part of. That's a closed chapter, a cautionary tale about what happens when you chase other people's dreams instead of your own. Last month, Sarah told me she's started dating someone, a fellow surgeon, someone who loves her for her brilliant mind and kind heart, someone who has no idea about the wedding catastrophe or the family scandals. She sounds happy. "Tell me about him," I said. "His name is David. He's from a working-class family in Iowa. His dad was a mechanic. His mom was a teacher. He paid his way through medical school with scholarships and loans. He drives a 10-year-old Toyota and lives in a studio apartment, and he's the most genuine person I've ever met." I smiled. "He sounds perfect for you." "He reminds me of you, actually, the way you were when Mom first described meeting you. Humble, hard-working, more interested in substance than appearance. I think I'm finally ready to appreciate that kind of man. I'd love to meet him sometime." "You will. Maybe Thanksgiving?" "I was thinking of bringing him home, if that's okay. I want him to see where I grew up, to meet the man who really raised me, to understand where I come from." "I'd like that," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'd like that very much." So this Thanksgiving, Sarah will bring her surgeon boyfriend home to meet her dad. We'll have dinner at the old kitchen table, in the house that's worth a fraction of what the Harrison mansion was worth, but contains infinitely more love. She'll show him her old bedroom with its science fair ribbons. She'll tell him stories about growing up with a single father who worked 3 jobs to send her to private school. She'll introduce him to the neighbors who helped raise her, the Chens who babysat, the community that was her real family. And maybe, if the moment feels right, she'll tell him about the wedding that never was, about the biological father who wasn't, about the mother who chose fear over love, about the night her dad stood up in front of 400 people and told a truth that destroyed everything, but ultimately saved her. Or maybe she won't. Maybe some stories are better left in the past, lessons learned and integrated rather than constantly retold. Either way, we'll have Thanksgiving dinner, this surgeon from Iowa, and my daughter and me, 3 people building a future based on truth and authenticity and genuine connection. No lies, no secrets, no pretending to be anything other than who we really are. That's the life Helen wanted for Sarah, but was too broken to give her. That's the life James Harrison couldn't understand, because he measured everything in power and wealth. That's the life I've always tried to live, the one I hope I've taught Sarah to value. Biology doesn't make you a father. DNA doesn't define family. Love does. Choice does. Showing up every single day, even when it's hard, even when you're not appreciated, even when your child looks at you and wishes you were someone else. I showed up for Sarah her whole life, and when she needed me most, when her world exploded and everyone else disappeared, I showed up again. That's what fathers do. That's what real fathers do. And that's my story. The story of how my daughter tried to erase me from her life, and how I saved her by telling a truth I'd kept hidden for 25 years. The story of how biology matters less than love, and how the man who raises you is more your father than the man who provided DNA. I'm Robert Mitchell. I teach biology at a community college. I drive a 15-year-old Honda. I live in a small house in a modest neighborhood. I'm nobody special by the world's standards. But I'm Sarah's father, her real father. And that's the only title that's ever mattered to me. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to an old man's story. I hope you'll take away one lesson. Be the person who shows up. Be the person who tells the truth even when it costs you. Be the person who loves without conditions. That's what real family looks like. That's what real strength is. And to all the fathers out there, biological or otherwise, who've ever felt underappreciated or taken for granted, keep showing up anyway. Your kids will understand eventually. It took Sarah 25 years and a catastrophic wedding, but she got there. Yours will too. Here ends our story. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to this channel for more.